Welcome to the oncoPT podcast, where you'll learn from oncology experts, practitioners, and patients to help you on your journey to become a confident and competent oncoPT. Here's your host, Elise Cantu.
Hey OncoPT, and welcome back to this episode of the oncoPT podcast. We are continuing our CSM preview sessions with a repeat guest, y'all. This speaker is presenting not once but twice at CSM about a very important topic. Now, previously, we talked to our speaker today, Katie, all about her session with Paula Stout when it comes to breast cancer rehabilitation. But this topic, like, as much as Katie knows that other information, Katie is a guru, I tell you, when it comes to CIPN. And I'm so excited to have her back. Please welcome back to the podcast, Dr. Katie Schmitt.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm so excited to talk about, as you know, my favorite topic in the world.
That makes me so happy that you are just as deeply devoted to CIPN as I get about talking about oncology rehab. And so this is a match made in heaven as far as could not wait to have you back on here. Obviously, we were so privileged to see your presentation at the Cancer Rehab Community Conference 2024, which just happened, all about CIPN. And this CSM session, I feel like, is the perfect kind of next step or springboard off into really getting down to managing this for our patients. So, little backstory. I learned about CIPN, a little bit on this is something that can happen with cancer treatments. And what I was kind of taught at the time, because I think that's what was available at the time, is, we can do some stuff for it and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I kind of felt like that was all I could do for CIPN. Until I started talking with you and really got to understand just how much we can actually do for CIPN. So can you tell us first a little bit about you and your practice, and then we'll get into your actual CSM session, which is all about CIPN.
Sure. I am Dr. Katie Schmitt, like Elise said. I am the physical therapist at Hollings Cancer Center down in South Carolina in Charleston at the Medical University of South Carolina. I have been with MUSC since 2019. I graduated from Columbia up in New York in 2018. And from my second clinical affiliation onwards, was kind of hooked on neuropathy. I started my office because I got introduced to the neuro-oncologist at MUSC and showed him, hey, I can fix your patients with neuropathy. We started a bond. He let me into his office during COVID. We spread it to a 5-day-a-week practice. Yes, I treat other things now like breast cancer and patients with GVHD and cancer-related fatigue. But every time there is someone with neuropathy, I get just really giddy and excited because we can do something for these folks who may feel like, I've had this for so long and why has nobody introduced me to physical therapy yet?
Totally. And so, you kind of talked about how you got into neuropathy. I would love to ask, because this is something I feel like people are going to ask as a sub question of this interview, of how did you convince this neuro-oncologist of obviously, that the work that you do is really impactful. How were you able to do that? Because that is huge.
So I had a very great boss at the time who I'm not with his company anymore, but I still think he's fantastic, who would go every month and bring tortilla chips and salsa to the different offices. And that was his selling feature. He brought them all snacks and got to remind them that he's a great PT. And so we went in and we had gotten a few referrals from MUSC before. And so we got to schedule a meeting with this neuro-oncologist, and we sat down with him and one of his nurses. And I was able to explain, look, I really feel like we can fix neuropathy. I know that it's got the large nerve fibers that are involved and the small nerve fibers that are involved. And I've been doing this I started it as a workshop when I was a student. And it started, instead of just doing a 1-day in service, it turned into a 4-week workshop. And I've been seeing people tell me that they're better and they're feeling different. And so I'd love to start to treat your patients. And then he started to refer to me. That was in 2018. And then in 2019, I went to the head of MUSC who runs the rehab office. And I said, why don't we have rehab for patients with cancer? This is dumb. And he said, yeah, all right. I get that. give me a pitch. And so I pitched it to him with all these bullet points and how we're going to, I used to run retail stores in Manhattan. So how we're going to make all this money.
Way to go.
Right? Kind of tap into that little retail aspect, besides the fact that we need this for our patients. And then he was like, okay, well, let's do this. And then COVID happened and then everything shut down. And then I emailed nicely the person who was the temporary director of the cancer center and said, hey, can I take you out to coffee? I really need to talk to you about how much we need physical therapy at the cancer center. And so I got to talk to him and sort of pitched my idea to him and also mentioned neuropathy. And then I got introduced to this wonderful woman, Jennifer, who runs like everything at the cancer center. And she said, all right, well, where do we start? And I said, well, what about Dr. Kakia, my fantastic neuro-oncologist who's now with, he's up at UMass. Why don't we start with him? And he said, yeah, we're only using half of these offices because we're doing telehealth and nobody's here because it's COVID. Come on in. And that's
oh my God.
how it started. And so his patients giving him the feedback of, yeah, I feel better. I feel different. Gave him the trust to then send them over to me.
Wow. Oh my God. I love so much of what you said, first of all, on, tapping into the retail and really selling ourselves. It brings to mind, I don't know if you were present for Dr. Abby Hagerfeld's presentation at the Cancer Rehab Community Conference, but she literally had a slide with a meme or something. And it was like, sell yourself. I mean, just fit that in perfectly. And how much it's important for us to talk about what we do and not just like, oh, I do this once. It's not a once off. Like you keep talking about it and you talk with multiple people about it multiple times over a period of time. Like, oh my God, Katie, I feel like you could teach a masterclass in that. That's so exciting. So it really kind of started with the neuropathy and obviously it's grown and expanded so much since then. So, at this point you're treating oncology patients day in and day out, large love. It's very apparent of the neuropathy. Can we now talk about your CSM session and what inspired you to now bring this love of CIPN to the big stage, if you will?
So this is actually, it's kind of a step backwards. So my first CSM session was about neuropathy. And so it was figuring out, I started doing case studies with the neuro-oncologist that I mentioned and another heme-oncologist. And so this kind of jumped off from that because I couldn't for the life of me get it published. But I was like, we need to talk about it. And here's why CIPN happens. And here's what we do about it. And here's the research that we've seen. And so that was the first CSM in 2023. And I knew that I would want to backtrack eventually. This CSM, it's a combination of working on neuropathy, balance, breathing, the diaphragm, and getting manual therapy. And that's how the workshop started. When I was working with a dance PT, and we were doing stuff for people's feet with Morton's neuroma and plantar fasciitis. And I was like, why don't we do this for CIPN? It presents similar. Let's touch the foot. And I'm so happy I got to present at the Cancer Rehab Community Conference because rub the foot, like that's it. That's the mark, and rub the hands. And but we need to treat the whole person. We need to treat the whole patient. And so it does tie in. The feet tie in, of course, to balance, and balance ties in very much to breathing. When I first got started as a PT, it's because I have asthma and I wanted to help little kids who couldn't breathe. And that's where it's all started from. So there's a very big component of the diaphragm and breath and the core. And once you hear that you have cancer or your loved one has cancer, you're automatically breathing from up in your neck.
Totally.
And you're not balanced anymore. You're not in your center anymore. And so it's going to be a combination of, if you haven't been to the first CSM session, or if you haven't taken the APTA virtual course, or if you haven't listened to the podcast yet, do it, listen to the podcast. But if you haven't, we're going to go through like the basics of what CIPN is and why it's caused. And then we're going to go through the benefit of manual therapy, because I can't just say, rub your feet. I have to, it's science. I have to prove why. And then we're going to tie it to the diaphragm and to breathing and to the core. And then we will tie it to balance and emotion. And then finally, how do you take all this stuff and write a short-term goal and a long-term goal and treat the person in front of you?
I feel like I'm getting a start to finish, like how to, and not just like how to do it, but also how to bring it into my practice. Like, Katie, this is outstanding. Oh my
Thank you.
God.
That's the goal. I want you to be able to go back on Monday and be like, boom,
Boom.
monofilament drop. I've got this.
Which, to give Katie even more where credit is due, 2 people reached out to us after the conference immediately and were like, I implemented Katie's, foot massage technique on patients day 1 back in the clinic after the conference. So like,
Yay!
if anybody is going to teach somebody how to do something and immediately put it back into practice, I mean, Katie has proven time and time again that she is that PT. Oh my God, that is outstanding. Now, to actually go back a little bit, Katie, you mentioned that you wanted to get this published, but we're having trouble doing so. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you pivoted to then presenting at CSM instead of, like traditional publishing?
Sure. So first, Dr. Kakia, he's the neuro-oncologist I was working with, and Dr. Hashmi, he's now at Sloan. He's the heme oncologist. Both of them are brilliant and amazing people. We did a case study of 2 patients first because I was like, this is fantastic. It's really making a difference. So we submitted that case study, and there was some feedback about, I really like the DN4 as an outcome measure. It's only suggested on the EDGE guidelines. There are the FACT GOG-NTX is the one that you should use. So there was some pushback about that. But the time that it took about 6 months to submit, get feedback, create the feedback, submit again, get rejected. That took a long time. So by the time the 6 months was over, we were like, well, now we have treated more patients. So we went through and we did a case study of 27 patients with different cancer types that we worked on with neuropathy, submit that to several different journals, got rejected for different reasons. Some of them were very nice and they were like, this is a great thing. It's a great idea. Why don't you rewrite it as this like perspective piece or this other piece? And we did. And then they changed the focus of their publications. And so that happened. And so then I thought, all right, well, one of the bits of feedback was there's too many different cancer types. So let me strip it back. A lot of the patients I work with are patients with multiple myeloma. That's one of the biggest groups from the heme oncologist. And so I'll strip it back to a 24 patient review of multiple myeloma. And then that got rejected for whatever reason. And so that has been where it was. And so now, it was during that 27 patient account that we were looking at all the different types that I was like, let me submit this to CSM also. And I was working on applying for the board exam, and I was working on a single case study about this for my board exam. And so it's just kind of been my world, is CIPN, and I love it, and I'm so happy about it. And then we also so now I'm working with a head and neck surgeon, and we have at Hollings, we have the Survivorship and Cancer Outcomes Research Project, which is SCORE. And we know that and I apologize to anyone from SCORE if I get this wrong, we're really good at treating the cancer. We're really bad at treating the patient. So how do we take everything that's out there, the literature, the research, how do we pair it all together and treat the whole person better?
Definitely.
And so now I am working with a new doctor, one of the head and neck surgeons, and we have this wonderful person who's gathering the data, and now we have a statistician. And so hopefully with this more formalized team, and some maybe funding behind it, I don't know, we'll see. Maybe now we'll get it published, or we'll take what we've learned from this, because we're still doing it as a retrospective study, and we'll put it forward and we'll do a going forward study so we can be a little bit more specific about our outcome measures. Perhaps that will help. But in the meantime, that was a really long-winded answer to that. In the meantime, CSM is the perfect stage to get up and say, hey, we can do this and we can make a difference. And I will show you how, and I will show you not just my evidence, but the evidence that's come out in myriad articles that are out there. And it's been really wonderful to take it from CSM to the Cancer Rehab Community Conference to teaching classes on it. And now coming back to CSM and being able to teach it more full circle. I'm really excited about that.
Well, and I'm really excited too. Obviously CIPN is a huge part of this, but also bringing in the balance and the breathing. I mean, I would be, just repeating what Katie said here, but just everything gets so crazy once a person's been diagnosed. So I'm curious then, Katie, why then? So the title of Katie's session at CSM is Oncology 20406, CIPN Balance and Breathing, an interactive workshop on manual therapy, diaphragmatic breathing, and improving balance. So why then are you choosing to do, it sounds like more of an interactive workshop setting versus, I mean, like you could always straight lecture, but I mean, like that's kind of boring. How did you decide on this interactive workshop structure here?
I think because of just what you said, that the straightforward lecture, some people are really great at the straightforward lecture, and it's really cool. And you learn and you're like, I'm enraptured in all this, and this is so fabulous. I come from a background of being a Shakespearean actor and doing groundlings and improv and all sorts of stuff in my previous life before I was a PT. And sitting through class, you sit through 2 hours of lecture in school and you're like, okay, now I'm exhausted. Sitting through some presentations that I've been through before, you sit, and I don't want you to sit when you come to my presentation. I want you to get up. I want you to move. I want you to be interactive because we're PTs. We want to
Totally
touch muscles. We want to do things. And we want it to be tangible. And for me, I feel like if I've done something, maybe I'll learn it better. And if I can go home, you always teach your patient, you're going to go home with this handout or this TheraBand or whatever it is. You see it on your counter and you're like, oh, I got to do my homework. I will have props and people will go home with props. The first CSM, I used yarn as TheraBands and everyone went home with a piece of yarn or they threw it out on the way out the door. But they had it so they could look at it and be like, right. And I remember how to do this exercise because I had my props and I did it. And so it'll be a combination of me talking, but no one wants to hear me talk for 2 hours. You want to do stuff and then be able to go home and implement it.
Yeah. Yeah. And what better way, like you said, to do that than to actually practice it at the conference with other PTs. And I think this also offers a great opportunity to maybe like meet some other PTs, maybe meet a future cancer rehab bestie, as we like to say over in the cancer rehab community. Like, what a great opportunity to do all of those things and then also get the feedback. I mean, from, you know, like if you're doing like a small group or a partner situation of, oh, I'm doing this. Oh, you know what? That doesn't feel very good or that doesn't feel right. And then you can make those automatic adjustments with somebody who ideally knows what it should feel like and what it shouldn't feel like before you go back with your own patient. So I think this is brilliant, Katie. Like all of the stars are aligning in this session already and it hasn't even happened yet. I'm so excited.
I'm very excited. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. And I think if this is something that sort of this model can be taken forward for other sessions, I always say all the time, I'm teaching everyone about CIPN and certain things in rehab are kept a little bit secret. And you're like, no, you can only learn them in certain ways. And I don't know if it's because people are afraid they're going to lose patients. If I teach you CIPN, I'm not going to lose patients. Like, and if I do, great. I would be so happy if nobody had neuropathy anymore. It would be fabulous. But this is a way for us to teach each other in the moment. And it's a way to really spread that information.
I'm so glad you brought that up too. I was literally talking to Kelly the other day on that exact topic of like, there's so much that I think in PT and rehab, like we do hold close to our chest because again, like it's this, like I get there's a lot of thought behind it. Okay. I personally don't subscribe to that thought because I live in a world and I'd love to know your perspective too, Katie, on this of like, so Fort Worth is the 12th or 13th largest city in the United States. It's not that small. It's actually quite big. And there are very, very few of us in Fort Worth who will actually treat patients who have cancer and cancer-related impairments. And my patients either will, you know, if they can't come in and see me, they go to Dallas for it, or they just don't get therapy. And, you know, if that means that all my patients are going to Dallas and they're actually getting help, awesome. But I have patients who are already driving an hour in to come see me. And Katie, before we started the interview, you mentioned you have patients coming in 2.5 hours to come and see you. There are more than enough people who are diagnosed with cancer in the United States and the world over. You're not losing patients. Like if you're a good therapist and you're implementing what Katie's going to teach you at this session and doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're not going to lose patients. And in fact, when your patients get better because you're implementing what Katie's talking about at CSM and all of the other amazing speakers at CSM, if you implement what they're doing, you're only going to become a better physical therapist for people who have cancer and getting more patients out of it. And again, I so firmly reject, even in a metropolitan area like this, there are more than enough patients to go around. And unfortunately, if patients aren't getting in to see someone, it's not that they're just going to go down the street. They're just not going to get the help that they need. Period. That's my perspective on it.
We hear that all too often. And I think that's one of the really wonderful things about telehealth, is now we can do this, and telehealth is fantastic, but it doesn't. And yes, I've had patients who I've never met in person. We do neuropathy stuff over telehealth. They get better. It's great. But if there was someone 10 minutes away, 2 towns away, however it is, the parking at my location is terrible. So if there was someone 10 minutes away who had better parking, and I could say, go see this person, they have good hands. I know they do. We've talked about this topic. I trust them. Go see them. That would be fantastic. And we also have patients, and maybe this is because I live in more of a beach town, but patients who are only here for certain points out of the year. So if we could network more in the session at CSM, and I could be like, hey, here's my person in New Jersey, go see them. Or here's my person in Wyoming, go see them when you're out of the area for that point of time. Because telehealth, I can't treat you outside of state lines.
Bingo.
And again, it's better if someone can get hands-on with you, because there's a lot we can learn about a person over the screen, and you see them in their house. There's a lot they can still hide from you. And our patients sometimes like to put on these brave faces. I get it. You're dealing with something horrible. If I can catch that glimmer, or if I can catch that sigh, and sometimes that's better in person. So if there's more people who know how to do this in person, there's more chances of us catching all those little things and then referring to our OT counterparts for all the anxiety everyone's got. And it just helps heal the whole person.
Why is it so important? I think we've addressed this a little bit, but let's dig in a little more. Why is it so important for the audience member listening to this right now to attend your session at CSM?
I think it's because I hope to give you the confidence to treat this condition as soon as you leave the room. It's something that patients say all the time. Why didn't anybody tell me about PT? I heard about gabapentin. I heard about, everyone right now is asking about the cold boots, which are great and probably really helpful. But what about the hands-on therapy and the balance training and us preventing your falls? And if you come to the session and you get excited about what we're talking about, you can go to the other sessions about treating patients with breast cancer, or treating patients with lymphedema, or the Lymphedema Treatment Act, or going to your session and learning about how to talk about it on social media. And then you come out of CSM and you're this excited, talented therapist who now has new tools in their toolbox. And that's what CSM is supposed to be about. One of the things we were talking about earlier, Elise, is that in oncology rehab, we can feel like we're islands sometimes.
Yes.
And CSM is a good time to, you're at a party with everybody else at the beach. Let's party and let's share ideas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is a party. Like, it's a great way to get in there and meet people and network. Like, Katie mentioned it. It doesn't have to be all this like formal, oh, hello, my name is Doctor. I mean, sometimes it is seeing each other across the room when you follow them on social media. Like I'm going to do with Katie, and be like, oh my God, I'm so excited to meet you in person. Cannot wait. What is one thing, just one thing, if you had to pick, Katie, what is one thing that attendees will take away from your session?
They will know how to do the neuropathy massage on someone, whether they like touching feet or not.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love that.
Give them the tools for that.
Love that. Okay, wrap up. When is your CSM session?
So I am so honored to be the very first CSM session on the 13th at 8 a.m. So excited. Bring some coffee. Everybody come.
What a great way to start this conference. I mean, just power punch, y'all. Mark it on your calendar. So that is the first day of CSM, Thursday, February 13th at 8 a.m. Central Time. We can't wait to see you there. And is your CSM session available on demand, Katie?
Yes, it will be on demand for anyone who cannot come, for anyone who's not coming that day. And as always, after you watch the session in person or on demand, shoot me an email. I'll talk to you all about this stuff all day long.
Oh my God, I love that. Can you actually share your email for us right now while we're here?
Yeah, it is drkatydpt@gmail.com. And the website is drkatydpt. And if you want to go on and learn the neuropathy massage in advance and practice your skills, you can do that. And thank you, Elise, and all of the amazing people from the Cancer Rehab Community Conference, because there's now a hand video also. Yes! I have gotten it together and the video is on there.
God. That was so fast. Genuinely, like, you set yourself the goal by the end of November and you well achieved that. So good job, Katie. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I cannot wait for your session. It is going to be so impactful. And so, again, it's great going to these conferences because you're exposed to so much information. But a lot of times it does kind of feel like we're drinking from a fire hydrant. And that is really challenging. And so sometimes instead of having to just sit through a session, actually getting up and getting to do some hands-on stuff is a really great way to break it up. So I'm so excited for this, Katie. Once again, her session is in the oncology section. 20406 CIPN Balance and Breathing, an interactive workshop on manual therapy, diaphragmatic breathing, and improving balance, happening at 8 a.m., 8 to 10 a.m. on Thursday, February 13th, 2025 in CSM, Houston, Texas. Can't wait to see you there. Okay, lots of details. We will, of course, link all of this and more in the show notes to today's episode. Cannot wait to see you all there at CSM, especially at Katie's session. Katie, any final parting words before we conclude today's conversation?
Just thank you, Elise, for talking about all of this, for making it easier for us to digest and learn what's going to be at CSM so we can pick out what we want to go to and pick out what we're going to have to save for the virtual option. And like Elise said, my first CSM, I fangirled out and stopped Nicole Stout on the street and was like, oh my God, you're amazing. Get to know everybody. Everybody say hi to everybody. We're a really nice, small, tight community of oncology rehab therapists. And this is going to be so fun to get to see people in person.
Oh my God, I can't wait. I can't wait. It's going to be so good. Ugh. So make sure to mark this on your calendars. It's going to be an outstanding session. If you can't make it, like Katie mentioned, it is going to be available on demand. So always a great second choice if CSM is not going to work out for you. But we cannot wait to see you there and for you to get your hands on this amazing information. So Katie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast again. It is always such a delight to have you on, especially when we're talking about CIPN, because that's, I'm not going to lie, like, I feel a lot more confident tackling CIPN and whatnot now. So I'm very, very excited for this. It's going to be fantastic. So thank you, Katie, again. We so appreciate you. We cannot wait to see you in Houston in just a couple months, as the time we're recording this in November. So we've got a couple months to go. But until then, and until next time, this is Elise with the oncoPT. And remember, you are exactly the physical therapist that your patients with cancer need. So let's get to work.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the oncoPT podcast. If you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, leave a rating and review, or support us on Patreon.